Welcome to our 5 on 5. I'm pleased to be joined today by Oregon Secretary of State Shemia Fagan. Secretary Fagan, I know how busy you are with elections right now. Thanks for taking the time.
Always happy to talk with you, Craig.
So what is going on at elections offices statewide at this moment?
So this moment, they're just tying up the administration. There may be ballots that arrived earlier this week that were postmarked by Election Day that have to be counted in small batches. But for the most part, our counties, the counties, we've been in touch with all 36 county elections officials, and they're just, making sure that those final challenge ballots, those deadlines have to, fall this week when they can people can challenge those ballots. So they're just really wrapping up the last few ballots that are out there. But for the most part, they're just closing up a very, very successful and smooth election.
What can you tell me went well in this election? Sounds like it did go smooth.
Truly everything. I mean, we prepared for any concerns that we had. We prepared in advance, and that's always the stressful part about elections is you do prepare for any advance concerns or issues that you might see with whether it's voter intimidation or, people showing up the last minute to vote in person was something we'd heard a lot about. So we just planned ahead and prepared for that stuff. And in the end, a lot of the things that we were concerned about didn't happen, but we went into that with the confidence that we were prepared in case they did. And in the end, Craig, we had a smooth election where Oregonians made their voices heard and selected a new governor, selected new members of Congress, and new legislators and other city councilors and mayors throughout the state.
Did anything not go according to plan? I know there was, a lot of coverage in Portland about Clackamas County, I believe maybe your home county, not doing many releases. A lot of people upset about what that meant for some of the results. What didn't go according to plan?
Well, I mean, everything went well, honestly. People are certainly expecting those results as quickly as possible. But from a administrative and legal perspective, the counties don't have to actually finish ballot counting until December 5th. And so obviously Oregonians are used to that happening much sooner and to getting those results as quickly as possible. But we always remind our county clerks to prioritize accuracy over speed. And in Clackamas County in particular, which is my home county, there was a bottleneck at signature verification. And that tends to be the place where most counties do see a bottleneck. And that's just because of our security features. When you hear conspiracy theories about people, turning in extra ballots or stuffing ballot boxes, remember how it feels 2 or 3 days after the election to not have those races that you're watching called. That feeling is because they're verifying every single signature. And that does take time to scan in every envelope, have that voter registration data pull up on a computer and compare the signature on that envelope to the signature in the voter registration database for, millions of ballots that came in across the state. That takes time. So security takes time. But in the end, people got the results, within a week of the election, which in the end is a good result. And we got accurate results, which is always what we're aiming for, is accuracy over speed.
All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll have much more with Secretary Fagan in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to our 5 on 5. Again, we're here with Oregon Secretary of State Shemia Fagan. Secretary, we've told viewers time and again about the new law this year allowing ballots to be mailed on Election Day. Can you explain to our viewers how the state ensures those ballots are valid and no fraud occurs?
Absolutely. Well, Craig, first off, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that since the Blazers lead the Western Conference, we call this the Damian Lillard rule, right? When Dame's hitting one of his famous, or now Jeremy Grant or all the other amazing players in the Blazers, Anthony Simons, when they're hitting those buzzer beaters, the ball needs to leave their hand before the clock strikes 0. But it's okay if it goes in the basket, a second or so after it goes 0. And then we have the same rule with our ballots. That ballot needs to leave Oregonians' hand by 8 p.m. on election night. And normally that just means putting it into a ballot drop box. But for folks that do mail their ballots, they can mail it by up to and including Election Day, as long as they get that postmark. And what happens at every county for the ballots that come in after Election Day, which the vast majority, they're going to come in after Election Day. Craig, they come in typically the Wednesdays or the day after the election. That's when the vast majority come in, maybe a few on that Thursday. And then really it's a trickle after that. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to check that postmark to make sure that it was postmarked by Election Day. And you may look and say, well, my mail doesn't have a postmark on it. Actually, a lot of post offices now use kind of an invisible ink. And so we made sure with some funds the legislature provided to my administration to make sure that every county across the state had the scanners to be able to read those postmarks, even if you can't read them to the naked eye. So they just make sure that ballot is postmarked by election day. And then if it's received within 7 days after the election with that election day or before postmark, then those ballots are cast on time under the Damian Lillard rule.
Okay, and yesterday, Oregon State Police came out and said that you told the agency Measure 114 will pass and go into effect on December 8th. It's about a 28,000 vote difference right now. I checked just a few minutes ago. Obviously, the election isn't certified, as you said, until I believe December 5th. Is the margin big enough, I guess, to call it now?
Well, it certainly obviously is up to the news media to project the winning of races. I don't know. I don't believe there are enough ballots left statewide to have affected the outcome of that race. But it isn't. I don't decide the effective date of measures. The Constitution of Oregon does. I believe it's Article 4, Section 1 of the Oregon Constitution says when the effective date of ballot measures is, which is 30 days after the election date, which this year will be December 8th. And I actually so counties have to finish counting the ballots completely by December 5th. That's the law. And then I have to certify the election before December 15th. So my expectation on these measures, because of that kind of conflict between the certification deadline of December 15th, but the effective date under the Oregon Constitution, is I'll be certifying those ballot measures on or before December 8th to make sure those dates line up.
You mentioned intimidation before being a concern with this election, and I know you're aware of a threat to Jackson County election workers 2 years ago. Are you aware of any threats or potential issues in this election statewide?
We didn't have any. We were certainly prepared for it. And one thing we did proactively was reach out to local law enforcement to make sure that they were, on alert if anything was reported. There were a few threats that we took seriously. People had notified certain organizations that were going to be threatening people at certain places. So we took action with our local law enforcement. And another thing we did, Craig, was we provided a Know Your Rights poster, because voting feels good. Voting is our democratic right. It's that level playing field that every person gets one person, one vote. And so we want to make sure that it's not something that becomes a scary process just because of isolated threats of intimidation. And so we really took a proactive measure and said Oregonians should know their rights as voters. They should know that they have a right to vote without intimidation, that they have a right to not have anybody obstruct their ability to get to a ballot box, the right to not be questioned about who they're voting for or their citizenship status or their eligibility to vote as they're going to vote. So we created a Know Your Rights poster in conjunction with the Department of Justice and provided that to all 36 counties and gave them the opportunity to print that out either in lawn signs, to put it on posters in their elections offices, or to attach it to drop boxes. And then we picked up the cost. We said, whatever whatever it costs you to put these Know Your Rights posters in a place where your voters in all 36 counties can see them, charge us. We'll then pick up the cost for that. We made the poster for them just so that folks know they're right, because voting feels good in Oregon. Participating in democracy is an empowering experience. And we wanted to make sure that that really takes center stage, not a few isolated instances of intimidation.
Well, I know how much you have on your plate right now, Secretary Fagan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Happy to see you.
You too. Stay with us. We'll be right back.